Hello everyone, it's me, Douglas, and you probably know me from all the comics I have done and all of the other stuff that I've done aside from comics, but potentially the thing that will bring you here today now is the visual novel that I'm making. We got another year. I released the first episode a year and a half ago, and it's been a long time coming. The second episode, I don't want to drop this visual novel, but there's a bunch of stuff I need to talk about insofar as the future of it, where we are, how we got here, and why this big delay happened. So I'm going to be talking all of that. Normally, when I post these kinds of updates, I do it by text, I type it out, but I don't know if that's easy to read because it would be very long. And also, I feel like in video format it just makes more sense. I can also include some video references to other things that I feel should be included, parts of this whole deal. So let's go. Let's start this whole exploration of We Got Another Year. First, I wanted to talk a little bit of a brief recap of the first episode, just from memory, because I didn't replay it in the 1.5 years ever since. We follow the story of Rob, and you might think, who is Rob? If you read the Golden Week comics 1 through 7, you will see that Rob shows up at the very end of part 7, when Matthew says that he wants to be with a well hung stallion, jokingly, sort of. Then we get to the end, we see that he is indeed with a well hung stallion that has never been introduced. And when I was thinking, um, I want to make a visual novel, I want to attempt to make a visual novel, I was thinking, what story could I tell? And I had a lot of ideas in my mind, but the only ones that felt prudent to even try because of a smaller scope. That's why I wouldn't need so much in terms of knowledge and expertise to make it happen. Would be a follow up to, at the time, Call Me Yours. I had written the first Call Me Yours, and I was thinking of making Call Me Yours 2 in visual novel format. In fact, I even have some videos around of a few tests I've done. I don't think I have the files anymore. And it was mostly just trying to see how things work. And I was trying to learn how to do that in Unity, which is a game engine, very popular one. It has a problem though. The problem with Unity is that it's a game engine that is meant to be all purpose, so it can do everything, but you need to know how to make anything. And I don't. I have little to no experience in programming. I'm not at all a programmer. And I wanted to make a visual novel. So going with Unity, albeit an interesting idea to, get my feet wet with the whole idea of making games and such, this is very bad for a newcomer, for a starter, because making visual novels in Unity is very kind of hard and tricky. You need, if you're a starter, a newbie like me, you need to get a module, an add-on, a pack, or whatever, a within the engine, someone have built a module that is a mini engine that you load into it, and then from Unity you are able to edit and create a visual novel. But because you yourself don't know the full extent of the code, if something goes wrong, you have no idea why. Not that it would be different with RamPy, which is what I eventually ended up using, but Unity felt like it was too much. It was too big an obstacle to try and clear at the time to get to the same end point. So I gave up on the idea, ended up doing Call Me Yours in regular comic format, and that test I have more or less been lost, and then I just gave up on Unity. But then I decided to come back to the idea of a visual novel, and I used the We Got Another Year. Same idea is I need to come up with a story. Where do I go? What do I explore? I had another idea, which was a cat in a police academy of only dogs. The police academy is only dogs, and This cat would be the only cat in it. It would be a lynx named Lee. Lee inks, as in, the liquid that you use to paint things with or write. So Lee inks is a pun, but also would be the name of the character, and also would be the protagonist of this visual novel, which is in a police academy last month of the training before he actually goes off to the field. So he would spend some time with his classmates to learn the ropes and kind of decide where he wants to go, but also who he wants to be with, because, it would be one of those furry visual novels. The problem with that is that I started writing the I started the whole visual novel endeavor in 2020, which was not at all a good year for making anything police themed at all. And up to a degree, it still isn't nowadays. So I kind of want to go back to that story, but I'll probably just change it to like firefighters. Who knows? Kind of probably would work. Not with all of the twists and things that I had planned for it, because the whole idea for that particular story is that Lee would be the only cat in a canine only police academy, but also his father was also one of the other few only feline cops there has ever been. But he's been arrested for crimes, and there's this whole like, oh no, Lee's here. He's already like a little bit ostracized because he's a cat, but then a little bit extra because of his father, and this whole deal would be kind of would play into the drama. But I didn't go with that story. Instead, I don't know how, but I landed on this story of, you know what? It would be interesting to follow one of the characters from the Golden Week that I never really got too deep into, which is Matthew. But I think it would be weird to go into a story of Matthew after the Golden Week, because we know that he ends up with Rob, and Matthew has that interesting personality thing that if you have ever played Life is Strange and Life is Strange Before the Storm, you probably notice something with the character of Chloe that is, in the first game, she's a fantastic backup character because she's an amazing support character. She is there, and the whole story kind of revolves around her. It's just amazing. But in Life is Strange Before the Storm, she gets promoted to a protagonist, and it's also a prequel, and you realize that Chloe is kinda shallow as far as a character goes. And then you realize that, oh, maybe making Chloe the protagonist wasn't a good idea. To some degrees. There's merits in that, but that's not the point. The point is that I realize Matthew's not a good protagonist. I don't think there's anything else on him that we could explore through his point of view. And besides, it would be a story that is kind of pigeonholed into Matthew meeting, getting to knowing, and dating Rob at the end of it, or the well-hung stallion. So instead, I decided to follow the point of view of this well-hung stallion, Rob. And that's when I started writing the story and trying to figure everything out. That was the second half of 2020. I started pondering the whole story, just thinking like, how am I gonna do this? What I'm gonna do? And just coming up with all sort of ideas to crunch into this project. And then I realized that, well, now is the funny, hard part of making decisions of how this is going to be. The first, most primal decision was deciding the engine that I would use, and I went with RamPy because it would be fun to learn some other engine, some other thing, but it would take more time, more expertise, and I don't have the time to invest into learning the tools to make this project that I don't even know if people would be on board with. So I decided to just make the project with whatever knowledge I already had. Originally, plans included like maybe let's make it in Unity, maybe let's make it 3D. But 3D is also kind of something that I don't know how to do that well and very time consuming. But originally, my idea was to kind of copy a little bit of the whole design of Persona 5 or 4 and 3 in other Persona games, which you would probably have noticed in that Call Me Yours Part 2 visual novel demo that I made. And in which you would have like the character in the map, like a top-down view, and you would control the character so they would move around, but the camera wouldn't be top-down, it would be a little bit angled, just so you can actually see the character. Instead of just seeing the heads, you would see the whole character as they move around and talk to people, which I always thought that's what I want my game to be. But I can't do that. That requires a lot of technique and knowledge to do, which I don't have, and learning how to do that would take a lot of time. And I don't know if it would add that much to the experience altogether. It's because what I want to do is very different from what I can accurately do. Not accurately, but what I can feasibly do with the time and means that I have. So I decided to scratch that idea and just go with just classic visual novel, just text and pictures. And then I started writing the whole thing, and two more decisions were made then and there. The first decision, in fact, this was around August, September of 2020. I made some tests and released some demos on Patreon of like, this is how the thing's going so far. What do you guys think? In which I tested two things. The first was if you are familiar with games like Persona or the Phoenix Wright series, you know that in Phoenix Wright specifically, characters always have two portraits. One is when they are facing you in the visual novel sections when you're doing the investigations, but when you're in the trial sections, you get to see the characters in a side profile view as they are facing one another, and I always like that style more, and I always prefer that. And because Robert wasn't an empty character, like in most visual novels, not empty, but the main character in a lot of visual novels is not a defined character. It's more so a blank slate in which you can insert yourself into. And that's done on purpose. But Robert is an actual character, and I wanted to give him personality and a um, specific traits. So I decided to have him, to allow him to have a portrait, have him there on the screen on one side and have the other characters on the other side, all facing one another. So that's a big decision I made then and there. Also, for whatever reason, I decided to animate everything and draw everyone in different positions. That's a that takes a lot of work. It's very time consuming to draw the same character in so many angles and animate all of those angles. Later on, I'll get onto the animation bit because that's an interesting topic, but we don't have time for that right now. Afterwards, what I decided to do, if you played Disco Elysium, you will have seen or realized that it's an adventure game. It's pretty much a novel. There's a lot of reading. There's a lot of text in that game, but it's an amazing game. It's great, and all of this text, all of this reading, just adds to it. And one of the things that really adds to it is that as a character who's um, the protagonist of Disco Elysium has a thing that has happened to him, and I'm trying to avoid spoilers in case you want to check the game out. Uh, because of this thing that happened to him, or just because that character is kind of different, he um, has a lot of personalities within him. There's because it's also a kind of an RPG game. You have skills, and you can assign points to these skills. And at several many moments during the game, when the character's talking, the character goes, says their line, then another character shows up and says their line, and then we go back to the main character who may say his line, or instead he might hear one of the voices inside his head, quote unquote, which are the many personalities, which are the many skills that you have at the beginning of the game that you put points into. And the game does this thing where if you have this skill at 3 or higher, you get to read this line of text. And it's just kind of fluff. It's just a little bit more to embellish the narrative and hardly ever matters all that much. It does matter quite a lot, and it gives you a bunch of context and a bunch of clues to what you're doing. And in some cases, you need to have a high skill to succeed on some things, because sometimes it's just guaranteed that you will see that line of text. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it says, oh, your skill is a tree, so let's make a dice roll and add your skill to that. And then if it beats a number, then you get to see a thing or do a thing. Otherwise, you fail and take damage. And after playing this Dualism, I realized that I like this idea of the character having inside voices. Because it's a thing I did a lot in some of my past comics and I stopped doing, which is the character having like internal thoughts that you can tell what they're going through. And in the comics, it's a little like makes too centric of who is the protagonist, because that's the one person you can hear the thoughts of. And in my newer comics, I wanted to avoid that. What with every comic being having different protagonists of sorts. So I threw that idea away. But with Robert, because we're 100% going just through his narrative, I thought it would be a little bit interesting. Just to differentiate a little bit more. Because usually in visual novels you have the character interacting with other characters or narrating their lives, or you have an actual narrator narrating what the characters are doing. I didn't want to have a narrator. I wanted the character of Rob to be telling the story. In fact, when you open the visual novel and saw the first episode, you see a few lines where Rob is like, ah, yes, thank you for coming. This is how it happened. This is how we met. And you can tell that it's Rob. Hopefully you can tell it's Rob telling people a story of how him and someone met. And then every time during the story when Rob is narrating, it's still like part of the story, part of the immersion of he's telling a story to someone, and you can hear that story in the way that he's telling it. Because we don't ever break this first character perspective of Rob. It's always Rob who's narrating like how his day-to-day goes or how he's talking to someone, and if there's something else that needs to be noticed or perceived, it's these internal voices that Rob has that are telling that to him, which are his reason and his intuition, because this Dualism has, like I said, a bunch of skills, like 16 or something like that, and I thought it would be cool to have like 4 skills, quote unquote, like parts to this character. And first it would be like reason and intuition, so like the logical side of things and the rules side of things and the emotional side of things, this is what I should do as a person who's in this situation right now dealing with another human being or human being. And I wanted to have these 2 sides to Rob, and I also wanted to have 2 other sides that would kind of be on the bottom, on the top and on the bottom, which is kind of like some uh, freedom, so to speak, some kind of I don't care, I'm just going through life doing my own things, and the other would be a more down to earth um, Rob, which would be like I need to really focus on work, on school, and the things I need to my future. And the problem with those last 2 things is that they would create the game over scenario. And while an interesting idea, I think I wanted to avoid, much like with Discoalism, I wanted to avoid having moments where you fail. When you want to do something, but you fail due to circumstances outside of your control or my control, like a dice roll. Or just having the story stop because you made choices and your choices led you to a game over. And you're like, but I wanted to make those choices. I want to see the story that would happen if I made those choices. And if I cut the story then and there, I feel like I would be robbing you of that opportunity. If you think about it, it would be an interesting thing also to add to the game. Mostly because my original idea was that having Rob be too high in the freedom level would make him um, have a bad consequence at the very end of the visual novel of like, he lost his job, he failed college, or something like that. Because originally I also wanted to track money, Like, how are you gonna spend your money? Oh, you don't have money. How are you gonna pay for your rent and this and that? But that would be a lot of things to manage, and I wanted to focus more on the story and less on the game aspects of this whole deal. And also because if it got too low on the thing of um, Rob focusing just on school and work, then at some point, depending on some other choice, like he is into this character, but things don't go forward, and he would, you know, fall into depression and just be like, things are not working out here. I need to. I just can't, and then he would move back with his family, and that would be a game over. I thought those are interesting ways that the story could go, but they tell a vastly different story from the one I want to tell. So I scratched those ideas, and also because it would add a lot of extra complexity to building the game, not necessarily to playing it or writing it, but to building the game. That's just a lot for someone who's just starting with visual novels. So I didn't want to, put all that pressure on myself, and I wanted to make something simple, something that I can deliver, which is also why I decided to make the story in episodes instead of just adding days to the story and releasing every month, just days on top of days. And I, I, I prefer to finish a whole episode and then ship it and see how people react to the whole episode, and then use that as a guideline for the rest. Now back to the characterization of Rob, the character. I wanted him to be an outsider, which is why he's from Spain and not from the place where the story takes place, Nolan. Um, Also, because apparently I have this thing where every story that I write, I need to have a foreigner character or someone that just really stands out. I don't know why. That's how I write. That's my gimmick for writing stories. And the other thing with Robert is that I wanted him to have a thing that really defines him. So the thing that would define him, aside from being an outsider, which helps, because anytime I need to just be like, hey, here's something that is interesting that is going on, that a character would have all the context in the world for this. If they were local, an outsider doesn't have context, so I can have the other characters explain something to Rob, and Rob be like, now I understand. And you, the reader, being the outsider as well, would not be left like, clueless when the characters are saying, let's go to blah 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 festival, and then everyone's like, yeah, let's go, and then you, the players, like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So having a character that's an outsider, someone to whom you can explain things and do exposition is always good. Even better if it's the protagonist, so long as you don't, heavy-hand it. Of course you can heavy-hand it, but you have got to be a little bit creative with how you write those kinds of things. The other thing that Rob has, insofar as his personality goes, is that I decided that Rob would be the kind of character who's 100% empathetic. I wanted him to always put himself on someone else's shoes. He wouldn't necessarily make the best decisions with that, but he would always do that. And those are the points in which the story offers you choices. Is when Rob thinks, oh, this is happening, but what are they thinking about the situation as well? Rob is the complete opposite of selfish. He's not selfless. That he's not selfless, but he does think of others whenever he's just pondering what to do next. He tries to put himself in other people's shoes, and that's what I decided would be the main characteristic of Robert, which also helps Roberto, actually, which also helps with the whole. It's a visual novel, and we need to. It's a story, and the story needs to be pushed forwards, and not always the thing that causes the story to move forwards can come from outside sources. Sometimes it has to come from the character itself, because Roberto, is not supposed to be a passive character. He's meant to be an active character because he's not a blank face that you never see to, that is meant to be a stand-in for the reader. He's a character in of himself who has his own thoughts and his own personality, and he acts on those things. So I want him to also take initiative and just do things sometimes. So it's not up to the player to be like, I'm going to find the job. I'm going to do this. Roberto does things for himself, which is why at the very beginning, where you're already like thrown into this big kerfuffle of things going and you're just being bombarded with information from all sides because Rob has a very active life. Things are happening all the times because he goes and seeks those things. That's the kind of character I wanted to write. And with all of that in place, I had the visual novel. The thing I had not, though, is the drama. Because every story needs a point where things clash. It needs something that doesn't go according to plan to really clash. And I don't write the kind of stories where the thing that happens, the obstacle, is a villain. The obstacle is usually something of the characters themselves. So in this case, I did use both. I did use a villain, which is something for the next episode that I'll be talking a little bit more later. But as you can tell, if you have read The Golden Week, is that Matthew has a life now in college, and you, if you read the visual novel as well, you can kind of sense that there's some involvement from outside forces on Matthew's life. And of course, if you read the comics, you know exactly who that is. And I want to have that person show up in a very unexpected way in the second episode, and I will be absolutely spoiling the ever living hell out of that in the next of these update videos that I'll be making, but for now I want to keep it a secret for a little while longer. And another thing I wanted to have as well was some kind of like character conflict within Rob himself. And I think at that time I was already like thinking of things I could include and put like things I wanted to talk about. There's a lot of things I want to talk about, but I just don't have the means to, just be pushing out story after story after story. So between this story that I've drew or illustrated and wrote about this character in this condition and the next, a whole half a year goes by. So, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of things I want to talk about and stories I want to tell. And the specific character conflict with Rob I found would be interesting to write that he's asexual, as in it is alluded in the visual novel that he had a previous relationship, but I also want to explore this perspective of someone who is asexual, someone who is ace, to want to be in a relationship, to feel alone, for a lot of reasons. Like, I'm an outsider, I came from another country. Here, I only have two friends, none of whom I see as as a romantic interest to begin with. And I had the previous relationship, things didn't work out, we didn't go into that. And to a certain degree, I feel alone. I do want the companionship, I do want to have someone who I can trust my life with, someone I can call a partner, and join into a lifelong adventure of, doing partner things. But I don't want the sex. I don't want that part of it. And within recent years, I've come to meet several ace people, and just trying to understand that and taking a page from Rob's book and trying to be a little bit empathetic and putting myself in their shoes, I kept pondering and thinking what it is like, how exactly it works in their minds, like what's their thought processes behind of the whole sexual intercourse thing. It's like, how do they see it? How do they feel about it? How this, how that? And there's a lot to it, really, if you go and read about it. And I did read a lot about it, but that was all the way back in 2020. And I thought, well, you know what? I do want to write about that. I want to write that kind of character. Mostly because it is interesting, but also because from a writing perspective, it's just complete twist and reversal on the tropes of visual novels, especially for visual novels. Because mm, Roberto, our protagonist, is a horse, and everyone expects horses to be well hung, much like we alluded at the very beginning. And I always thought it would be kind of comical for whenever Rob broke it out to Matthew, like, I'm Ace, I don't like sex. And then for Matthew to be like, but you're so well hung, what a waste, why you're not using it? And then I thought, that would be comical to begin with, but also that there's some problematization there. And I thought, how can we explore that a little bit deeper, a little bit more, not reduce everything to this surface level joke, but actually talk about this subject. And I think that this is the whole deal that I'm gonna go with is Matthew really likes Rob, Rob likes Matthew, and this is the clash that happens in the relationship is I like your company, but I don't want to engage in sexual activities with you. And Matthew being like, I like your company as well, and I do want to engage in sexual activities with you, but I have to learn to respect this. But ultimately, that's the devious, insidious part of this visual novel is that in furry visual novels, you're usually the protagonist, and the protagonist always gets their way. I also read I watched a lot of videos about writing stories and romance and this and that. And in a visual novel, if you are the protagonist and there's a bunch of characters for you to choose, you can be absolutely 100% certain that whoever it is that you point your finger at and say, I want to bang you, within a couple of hours, maybe 3, of playing that game, you'll be banging that person and then developing some kind of relationship. And there's like every visual novel is a trove of characters, a literal buffet for you to choose who to eat, quote unquote. And that kind of throws that trope on its head when you are controlling a character who does not want to bang anyone. When you, the character, consciously have to make the choice of, you, the player, has to consciously make the choice of, I, the player, want to see Rob and Matthew bang a lot, but I, the player, want also to empathize with the character of Rob, who does not want to be put into that position because it's a very uncomfortable thing for him. Not that he won't do it, but he'll be uncomfortable the whole way through. And you, as the player, has to come to grips with that decision, with that, and decide, do I respect Rob, this fictional make-believe character, these sprites on the screen, of this story that I'm reading, or do I just go with my own thing and like, yeah, let's see them bang? And just part of me is doing this just for the shock value. I just want to see, just throw this out on the world and see how people react. And just like, yes, people are hating it or people are loving it, and just seeing how that affects everyone. And that's kind of what I live for, is just to write things that make people feel things. And I'm really eager to see what people think of that and how they'll come to grips and deal with that whole situation. And that's pretty much my whole general plan and ideas for the first part of the first episode of We Got Another Year. Um, that's pretty much all of it. And the delay, it's been a year and a half, and I need to talk about that. This is something that I didn't really go out super duper public with at all, but like the entire shebang of things. But what happened is that I started making this game whereabouts of like half of 2020, around August, September. I started actually making things. When it came to October, I just took a break from literally everything and just wrote the whole script in a month. and then I spent the next 2 months just drawing all the animations and backgrounds because that takes a lot of time. Also, trying to network with some people, being like, "Hey, can I use your music? Can I use your music? Hey, can you lend your voice to this character? Hey, can you lend your voice to that character?" And that all those negotiations took a little bit of time because those are also decisions I made to go with. But then at the end of December, I released December 2020. I released the first episode and saw what people thought of it, and was like, yes, finally, I did it. I released the first episode of this visual novel. Now, what do I do now? And the idea was to start planning for what's next. And then in January, I I had been trying to show this visual novel to people. I tried to show it to my sister, who didn't want to play it because it's in English. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm Brazilian and I speak Portuguese. My family speaks Portuguese, but I'm the only one in my family who speaks English. So when I go and make a whole visual novel in English, I'm limiting a lot of people from my country from being able to read it. So I decided, well, sure, if my sister wants to play it, but she can't because it's in English, I'll go and translate it for her and for everyone else who also wants to play but can't read English. So I spent like a week translating the whole deal and publishing it. I don't think I tested that at all. And then I also trying to figure out the code which will allow you to change the language right then in the main menu. Because for the love of God, games need to have a way for you to change the language in the main menu without going to settings, without doing weird stuff. You just need to be able to change the language of a game from the main menu. Like the first options we should be able to see is new game, settings, and language. That's it. That's all games. They need to do that. Please. But I did that. I translated the whole thing. Also, the updated version corrected a few bugs along the way, and um, yeah, and added a whole new language to the game. Some people started asking about a port for mobile, like running it on your Android cell phone, and I thought about doing it like only when the whole thing is done. Makes sense. And then I started to think, what's next? I need to make the next episode, but I can't just start right away. I think I'm gonna do a comic first. I think that's what I thought. I don't remember. It's been a long while. February 2021 was a month where a lot of stuff happened because I had some. I've been having falling outs with my ex for like I a year or over a year, like a long time. And then in February was when a lot of stuff started coming down, and I started realizing that I'm unhappy and I don't want to be here anymore. Then I broke up with my ex after being together for 6 years or so. And because I moved to another state to live with him, I had to start figuring out a way of coming back home with all of my stuff that I gathered during those 5 years of living with him. And then I did that, um, broke some stuff on the way, had to pay a lot of money for renting a car, and that put a very that was a very deep stab in my budget, so I had to recover that somehow. So I started thinking maybe I'll do a comic that's easy while I kind of reset my head and put everything back into place. I'll do a comic that's a little bit easier to do, or so I thought. And then when I came back here to my hometown, I immediately just fell into a bout of depression for a couple weeks or so, where I didn't have the strength to do literally anything. And then as soon as I got better from that, I got bad again because I got COVID from my father, who got COVID, and then I got horribly bad in March 2021 from COVID, and March, April, and then mid-April, my father passed away from COVID, and then everything just was like thrown up in the air. Nothing made sense anymore, and I really had to take some time to think my life, my whole life changed in a matter of like 2 months. Everything changed. So I decided I just cannot focus on continuing this whole visual novel project with a lot of like variables and a lot of weird things while all of this is happening around me. So I decided I'm going to shift back to something more manageable, which is a comic. So I started doing the Francis story, which is also another thing that I was thinking during this time. Like, I want to tell a story of someone who has some personal character conflict. What is this conflict? And some friends that really helped me out during those very trying times of the beginning of 2021. Both of whom have autism. One confirmed, the other suspected. Um, and then I thought, well, it's not the first time I hear about autism or interact with people that have autism. And as far as it goes, pretty much everyone that I interacted with that has autism or is in the spectrum rather have been like super incredibly swell persons who are like just very focused. They're very they're like in a very good place in their lives. They have achieved a lot of things, and I always like admire those people. And I decided, you know what? I think I'm gonna write a story about that. And also, it was a good way of closing the whole arc with Bradley, who was the only one of the group left without a significant other. And then I started talking to some people like, hey, so about this story about the call it what you want. I want to write a character that has autism and that meets Bradley. So how do I go about that? And I talked to some people who gave me a lot of pointers, who gave me a lot of ideas, and um, and also they really liked the direction of the story. Some of them suggested it, where the story isn't all about Francis has autism. Let's focus on that the entire story. The story is Bradley has a trauma of meeting new people because of his very problematic ex, and Bradley needs to get away from that and move on with his life. But the person that comes by and changes that and makes things move on for him is someone that he didn't expect, someone that just goes and kind of acts on impulse and just does whatever. And it just so happened that maybe the reason why that person does that is because of autism. And then Bradley's like, well, would you look at that? And just at the very end, my whole general idea is for the whole comic to be centered about Bradley has problem opening himself to other people, and only at the very end I would reveal like, oh yeah, Francis has autism, and then I ended up writing that story, the Call It What You Want Parts 1 and 2. So that's all that I did during 2021, and now with the beginning of 2022, things were still very iffy, very kind of all over the place with a lot of things. So I decided I am not yet ready to get back to the visual novel project. Let's do something else. And then I wrote, or rather illustrated that story I wrote a while ago, A Grizzled Affair. I renamed it to Bottoms Up, made a whole thing, made a comic, which is finished now, so go read it, everyone. And now I said, okay, enough time has gone by. There's a lot of people who have been requesting information news on We Got Another Year on the itch.io page. People are like, hey, is this gonna keep going on? And I feel like, man, those people have been waiting for a long time. I need to get back to it. I need to, just be like, I don't know what the future holds. I have no idea what's gonna go on. But I owe it to those people to finish that story. So that's what I'm gonna be doing for the next however many months. Every week I'll be uploading a video like this on Patreon and also on everywhere else. And with the support of the patrons, on all of the people who have bought, We Got Another Year on itch.io, I'll keep sustaining myself financially as I just work on the visual novel and try and see what I can do. And just try and keep going forwards. Um, some of you may have seen a video that I posted like at the beginning of 2021 of me moving back to my parents' house all the way back in March of last year. And you will see that the room that I was showcasing is very different to the one where I'm currently in, and that's because life is weird. Things keep happening to me for some reason, and once again, I've been relocated to a whole completely different place. I was not planning this, but um, I'm in a different place, still within my parents' house, but the whole living situation here is like a mess. So I'm in another house and everything's a mess. I don't even have a proper kitchen yet, and I need to sort that out. I need to sort a lot of stuff out. So, so I'm just saying, life has been very weird and very complicated and very just all over the place for me this past year and a half, which is why it's taking this long to continue with the comic, or rather the visual novel. But closing words. I'm really thankful for all of you for having um, kept up with this whole project for however long it has been. Like actual to the day, it's been like a year and 9 months. It's been it's been a hot minute. I'm really thankful for all of you guys to keep having trust and belief in me. I know that I'm very spotty with updates. I hardly ever take to the social medias to really just like go down to the dot, give updates on what's going on. Even on Patreon, I hardly ever post things on Patreon other than just the new page. And with this past months, this past year, I've been really spotty with the whole posting on Patreon thing where it used to be that every Friday I would post a new page. Now it's been like stuff has been going on and I didn't post anything for the entire first 3 weeks, and then on the last week of the month, I just crunched and did all of the pages at once because time has just been really weird here. Things have been weird, and despite all of that, you guys are still uh, believing in me and trusting in me and supporting me, and all of that really matters. And I'm really, really, really thankful for all the help that you guys have been giving me throughout all of these many years. And I am very, very happy to have your support, and I don't want to disappoint. I can't make promises. I don't know how long it'll be until I finally upload an update to We Got Another Year, the visual novel, second episode. But I want to take as long as I need to make sure that it's something good for you guys. I want to reach out to other people, see if I can find more voice actors for the new characters that will be introduced. I want to reach out to more furry musicians, just get more content in the game. Maybe go a little bit in deeper with the whole story, do more complicated, more complex things rather, with the mechanics and the storytelling and everything. And overall, just want to give you guys something that everyone will be happy to have experienced. I don't know that it'll be good. I hope that it is. Um, but overall, I'm just really happy that you guys are have been along for this journey, this weird, weird, weird journey. So that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so very much. Honestly and earnestly, you are what keeps everything afloat. And I will see you all next week. I'll be recording another video explaining, completely spoiling the story of the second episode of We Got Another Year. I'll be telling exactly where I want to go with the story, not just for episode 2, but for the overall thing, what I want to do, some of the feedback that I've gotten from some people who have played the game, and how I'm going to address those feedbacks, and just overall, discuss a few more things and post this video, see how you all react to it, because depending on how you all react to it, I might change my mind overall on those things. And I also want to start diving a little bit deeper into the whole visual novel affair, because that's more of a rant, but sure, whatever. I'm gonna include it in the video anyways. I've been doing this whole visual novel thing for months. It took me months to get the first episode out, and I've done a lot of research, I've done a lot of reading, I've done a lot of just searching for information on how to do things for the visual novel, like animating characters, all of that. And I found a lot of that resource on the official documentation for Rampai, and on some random kind of lost videos on YouTube teaching like this is how you do this is how you do that. But there is a lot of furry game developers out there, some of whom I did reach out to and being like, "Hey, I thinking of doing my own game." That was all the way back in 2016. They probably don't even remember me saying that. But some I have reached out to way more recently, and I said, "Hey, now I'm finally working on my thing, and I'm finally like putting work into it. It's starting to shape up. Can you help me out with these, with that?" And some people said no. They decided to not share resources with me. And sure, you are always in your right to deny something that you have spent time and energy and effort into creating. It's your creation. You don't need to share it with everyone. But I think it's a very bad behavior from not from like a business level, from a financial level, from a just from strict business level. It makes all the sense in the world. But I don't see all of this that I'm doing, that I'm creating as a business. I don't want all of this to be focused on money. There's a lot of stuff that I could have done years ago to make more money out of everyone. But that's not what I want to focus on. What I want to focus is just offer stories to you all. Maybe they're not that interesting stories. There's a lot of stories out there. By interesting, I mean stories that everyone will agree with. There's a lot of stories. I know I deal with a lot of like heavy subjects and topics in my stories, things that people will feel very uncomfortable in reading, and part of that is on purpose because I want to offer things, feelings to people that they might not find elsewhere otherwise. And I do it because sharing is what I believe the world should be about. I believe that we as creatives, not specifically furries, but we as creators, we as creatives, we should be sharing everything we can with each other, because me sharing something with you doesn't mean that you're gonna straight up copy what I've done, and that all of the hours and months and years of effort I put into this thing will be wasted if I share it with you. If I share it with you, you might use it in some nice way, in some creative way that I never thought of, and then we can have this back and forth, this collaboration of ideas and just technical knowledge. Because I'm I'm an illustrator and a writer. I'm not at all a programmer, a coder, like I said before. My wheelhouse of talents is kind of narrow to this creative sense, and to the technical sense is very lacking. And in this point where it's lacking, it would be good to collaborate with other people. And I want to be able to collaborate with other people on that. And I want to be making videos going forward, uh, explaining exactly how I did everything about this visual novel, from writing the script to um, doing the animations, the sound, everything that I have done. I want to go and explain it little by little. That's so we can have, that's so I can give more to you all, not just the finished product. I also want to show you the making of the whole development process of everything. Um, because if the finished process If the finished product doesn't really inspires you in any way, shape, or form, sure. But at least hopefully the how I've gone and done it will help someone else who, much like me a couple years ago, was looking for answers but couldn't find it, was looking for help but was denied it. I don't want the future creators of the fandom or of the world to not have the opportunity to find resources and to be able to create stuff. I believe that everyone out there has amazing stories, amazing things to share with the world. They just need resources. So I want to be able to provide that. And that's a little bit of a rant on my part. Thank you for listening. And that's pretty much it. I hope you all have a wonderful week and a wonderful everything. And I'll be back with you on the second episode. Second, I know, uh, Devlog, I guess, where we go over all of this again, but with a different content. Things I'll be talking next time out. And I'm sorry that this video is long, but I just have a lot to say and I can't compress it into text, so you all have to suffer by listening to me talk about those things for a very long time. I'll try and make it shorter in edit and post, but we'll see how it goes. In any case, thank you all so very much, and yeah, thank you. You're awesome. And goodbye.